Hey, and welcome to Dr. G Speaks. I am Dr. Kristen Guillory, and I am so very excited to help you experience a life of freedom, faith, and fun you may not even realize is possible. Listen, I know you feel held back, I know you feel stuck, and I know you are hiding. As a coach and the author of Look, Stop Hiding, How to Find Your Voice and Never Dim Your Light Again, you will get to listen to some amazing stories, receive some homework, that's the professor in me, and get some tools to help you live the life you deserve. It's time to quiet the noise and walk in the fullness of who God created you to be. It's time to stop hiding and start thriving. Together, we'll uncover your potential and ignite your journey to a fulfilling life, a life of freedom. So, if you are anything like me and you love the sun, thrive in the sun, you want to be in the sun as much as possible, you would absolutely understand why I am recording today's episode sitting in the sun. The weather today in Dallas, Texas in February 2026 is magnificent and slightly abnormal. I mean, I thrive in the sun, and anyone who knows me knows that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to record today in the sun. So shout out to those of you who thrive in the sun, and shout out to those of you who don't love the sun, and that's okay too. About a year and a half ago, I was a guest speaker at a corporate event, and the event was specifically talking about advocacy and support for women in the corporate space. And even more specific to men who want to support women in the corporate space. And I was being interviewed and a lot of great questions were coming up, and then it was time for the Q&A with the audience. And there was a gentleman that stood up and he said, "Dr. Guillory, what is something that men who have a desire to advocate for women, what is something that we can do?" And immediately I said, check other men. Check other men. Yes, we appreciate seats being created at the table, but let's be honest, we can create our own table. Yes, we create space being made, and I'm not saying don't do these things, but for me, the number one thing men can do is check other men. What do I mean by check other men? Check other men if there is a man who is mansplaining, who is taking over the meeting, who is negatively talking about a woman behind her back. Check him. Check him. If there is a man who is sharing a crude joke, if there is a man who is calling a woman out of her name, who is being disrespectful, check him. If you are witnessing a man being verbally, emotionally, physically harmful to a woman, check him, say something. One of the reasons that I stand in the gap for women all the time is because there are so many women who are afraid to say something. There are so many women who don't know what to say. And there are so many women who are tired of doing so. And just because I do it doesn't mean I always want to do it. And his response was, "Thank you so much. I receive it. I'm going to take it back and share this with my team." I'm so grateful that I am connected to some men who desire to check other men and respect women. And I want to tell you all a couple real life experiences. The first, I was traveling with a friend of mine and we went into a store. And I began to ask the salesperson multiple questions, and the salesperson never looked at me. He looked at my friend, who was a man. I would ask the salesperson a question, and he would look at my friend to answer the question. So he's answering my question, but looking at my friend. And this happened multiple times. After a few times, I looked at my friend and I said, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go." So we walk outside of the building, and I said to my friend, "I don't like that he was looking at you while answering my question and really never looked at me as I was asking him questions. Would you go back in and say something?" I said, "I was about to, but I want to ask you to do so." And my friend said, I was actually going to say something, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to. It would be my honor. And he goes in the store. 3 or 4 minutes later, the salesperson comes out and he's a young man. He's maybe 24 or 25. And he looks at me with so much remorse and he says, I'm so sorry. I look at people as equal and I'm so sorry. If I was ever my intention to do that, I said, well, it's not about your intention. You did not look at me. You answered my friend. I know you meant no harm. I know that. But to the person, if it is a woman or man who is asking you a question, address them. And he said, I'm just used to couples coming in and the husband making all the decisions. I said, I hear you. And I know you meant no harm. And once again, he said, I am so sorry. I am so very sorry. So my friend comes up to me and I looked at him and I said, thank you so much. And he told me what had happened in the conversation inside the store. He said that he went back in and addressed it with the young man, and the young man apologized to him. And my friend said to him, I'm not the one you need to apologize to. You need to apologize to her. And I said to my friend, thank you so much. He looked at me and said, my friend, next time you won't have to ask. I looked at him and was like, what? It was as if my nervous system relaxed in that moment. And I said to him, you don't understand what that means to me for you to go and stand in the gap for me and do that. I do it often. It doesn't mean I want to. I get sick of doing it. Thank you. And he looked at me again and he said, I'm so sorry that you experienced that. And I gave him a hug and I had some tears that were coming down my face because just because I can do it doesn't mean I want to. And I shared that story with many women in my circle, friends, family, clients. Every woman, when I told them the line or the statement that my friend made of my friend, next time you don't have to ask, every single woman said, ooh, they clutched their pearls. They said, oh my goodness. And I shared that with my friend. And he said, that's interesting that out of all the stories that we have from this particular trip, that's the one you shared the most. I said, yes, because the other things you did were beautiful and amazing. It was a beautiful time and intentional things and details and upgrades and all that. It was so amazing. And I said, but that, what you did, that rarely happens. And it's evident by the response and reactions from so many women. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine and I asked her the question, girl, do you often feel safe or protected by men? And she took a moment to pause and she said, girl, I don't. I hadn't really thought about it, but outside of my dad and my brother, I don't know if I do. And I had the same revelation of I don't always feel safe and protected around men. And it is unfortunate to say that. And I lead initiatives for men. Now, what I do know is if I were to call, there's probably a list of 50 men I could call who would be there for me immediately. So I'm not taking anything away, but that is the truth. I don't. So the times that I do, they stand out. There was a gentleman who attended a couple of my Candid Conversations for Men events, and he began to send me some inappropriate and just weird emails. I had one of my team members who was a woman respond back to him and say, Dr. Guillory does not discuss that with people who are not in her circle. You need to communicate with me. Your messages are inappropriate. He sent me a couple of voice notes and I think a DM. So I informed two of the men on my Candid Conversations team. I forwarded them the information. Hey guys, he's making me feel really uncomfortable. Would you all handle this? And they emailed me back immediately. Dr. G, we got it. We're on it. We got you. I felt like tearing up in that moment. And I think that is what told me that I don't know if I often feel protected by men. My brother and I were at lunch, and We were talking about this, and he said that one day he was walking in a store, like in a grocery store, and he observed a woman who was loading like five, six, 7 cases of water in her car, and she was struggling. And he said he noticed there were a group of men that were maybe 7 feet from her. And he said none of them offered to help her. So my brother, who physically is about 6'4", 300 pounds, he walked past them and looked at them and said, "Y'all not going to help her?" And then he went to her and did ask, "Can I help you load this?" And she said, "Thank you so much. Yes." And my brother asked me, "Do you like that I did that?" I said, "Jason, absolutely. That is my favorite story of the week. Thank you for standing in the gap for her. And thank you for checking those men. They're not going to say anything to you, Jason, because who you are and your size, they're not. But there's a chance if a woman would have said, 'Are you not going to help me?' If they're raggedy men, they might have said something crazy to her. Thank you. Thank you. It's unfortunate. I don't know what it is. I'm not blaming people by any means, but that doesn't happen enough. And I did say, now she had the right to say no. If you were to ask her, "Can you help?" and she said, "No, thank you," she has the right to say no. I was speaking at another event. There was a Q&A, and this event was for men. And one of the gentlemen stated that he is someone who believes in chivalry and that there'll be times where he's offered to hold the door for a woman or do something else for a woman and they decline what he's offering. And he was like, "Man, I believe in chivalry, but women don't want to accept it." And my response to him was, if you are truly a man who believes in chivalry, you do not change who you are. A woman has the right to accept it or not accept what you're offering. You don't know her story. You don't know why she is refusing what you are offering. But if you genuinely want to hold a door open for a woman, etc., you can offer it, but she doesn't have to accept it. One of my former graduate students told me about a time she was at a restaurant and the table behind her was talking about the waitress's booty. And they were making different statements about it and kind of pointing. And my student got the waitress and said, "Hey, excuse me, they're making fun of you or they're making kind of crude statements about your butt." And the waitress went and got the manager, who is a man, and the manager went to the table and asked him to leave. And that's an example of two people standing in the gap, my student who did as well as the manager. But here's my problem with this whole thing. It was a table of my graduate student said they looked to be late 20s, early 30s. So it was a table of grown men. And not one man said anything like, "Hey, y'all don't need to be doing that. Hey, watch out about doing that." And I have problems when these kinds of things happen, checking other men. I remember watching something and there was a guy who was referencing women. "Oh, these bees are crazy. That bee is crazy." And that guy said, "No, you're not going to call them that. You're not going to reference women as such." That is an example of checking men. There are some things for me where I can identify character and integrity pretty quickly by just a few statements. One character trait that I will never be connected to a man that does the following, who calls women out of their name. So if he ever calls a woman the B word or a hoe, whether to her face or in talking about women in general, "Oh, you know these bees," absolutely not. I will never be connected to someone like that. Someone where there just isn't character, where you may be kind to a few women, but you are not to all women. Now, I am not saying that all women are perfect by any means. I'm not saying that, but when there's a vast difference between the treatment of the couple women around you and your dismissal or disrespect of other women, that is character. That is character. Another friend did something recently that actually brought me to tears. We had gone to a conference together. We both spoke at this conference. And as we were landing, he was giving me an update on something that happened with one of his friends. And he has a friend, I'll call her for the sake of this conversation, I will call her Kelly. And he was saying that he had a conversation with the former board where Kelly worked. because about 3 or 4 months ago, Kelly was laid off. And what made it really, really difficult for my friend on behalf of his friend was that Kelly was dealing with her mom who was declining. Kelly's mom's health was not good and could have been not with us any longer any day. And they let her go. And it was devastating for Kelly, and my friend was devastated for her. And what made it even extra impactful for him is he is affiliated with this organization. And he was very disturbed. He was very disturbed how they treated her. And Kelly is a Black woman. And we're landing, and he's filling me in. He said, "Oh, yes, I called the board since I am part of the organization. And I shared with them my experience and my opinion that I did not like how they handled Kelly, that I think they could have done it better, and especially doing that to her when her mom was not good." And he said the board member responded by saying, "It was so difficult for me to make that decision. And I was so mindful of it. And I took the steps and wanted to make sure that we did it with the best care. But it was something that was necessary, but it was so hard." And as my friend is telling me this, I looked at him, and we're landing, like we are landing. And I look at him and I say, "Thank you for standing up for a Black woman. Thank you. Thank you for standing in the gap for a Black woman." And I began to shed some tears. And I said, people just don't. Unfortunately, Black women are not stood up for in the way that we should be. Unfortunately, Black women don't have people standing in the gap. And I'm crying and he's crying. And I said, listen, these are tears of joy. These are tears of relief. Thank you. And he said, "I didn't even think about that. Why I did it. It was wrong. And I needed to say something." And I said again, "Thank you for saying something and standing in the gap for Black women. Thank you for standing in the gap for all women, but in this case, for Black women." I said again, because unfortunately, it doesn't happen for us as much as it does for other people. And he said, "My friend, why do you think that's the case?" I said, "Because there's this idea that Black women are strong and Black women are this and this. And because life circumstances have made some women have to be that way and have to stand up and have to do all these things, there's this subconscious assumption that Black women don't need protection, don't need people standing up in the gap for us." I said the other part of it is just because we look externally like we're okay, we may not look like we're falling apart. We may not look like the damsel in distress. We may not look, but it doesn't mean that we don't need protection. It doesn't mean that. I know someone who went through a divorce a couple of years ago and shared with her now ex-husband's friends who she thought were her friends what was going on. Like, hey, my husband is doing this and my husband's doing this. And they did not believe her because they never saw her cry. That's what they told her. "Well, we never see you emotional when you share." And I remember thinking, yeah, but y'all haven't seen her cry when she's at home. She's been crying for years. So just because you don't see her cry, you're not going to hear her words of how she is being mistreated. You're not going to hear her words of the cruelty that's going on because she's not crying. And unfortunately, that happens to women. That happens to Black women. That happens to women of all races, where there's an idea that if she's not crying, then she doesn't need anything. So, in addition to number one thing men can do to support women and advocate for women is to check other men. Another thing that men can do is to believe a woman's words. Listen to her words. If she is saying that she is scared, if she is saying that some treatment is going on, believe her. And I'm so grateful that a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mark believed one of his colleagues. So a woman reached out to me for support in putting a message together. And she began to share about just some hard things going on in her marriage and that she was experiencing physical abuse and a lot more. And she shared with me that Dr. Mark, who is the person that introduced her to me, one day at work, she confided in Dr. Mark and said, "This is what's going on at home. I need to leave. I'm trying to leave, but I'm afraid. I need to get myself and my daughter out of here." She's telling me the story. She said the next day, Dr. Mark and four of his fraternity brothers showed up at her house with a moving truck ready to help her pack and move out. She said he didn't even know me that well. I just appreciated that he believed me. And they moved her out from this abusive household. About a month later, I was hosting one of my men's events, and I did ask her, "Do you mind if I share this publicly to celebrate Dr. Mark?" And she said, "No, please do so because he might have saved my life." Dr. Mark didn't know I was going to do this, but I brought him to the front and celebrated him in front of a group of men and thanked him for standing in the gap. Not only did he stand in the gap, he believed her. He didn't ask, "Well, what did you do?" He didn't ask, "Well, how often does it happen?" He didn't ask. He believed her. He believed her, standing in the gap and believing her. I remember I was driving to Houston and I stopped to get some gas. And I was pumping gas, and there were four men that walked out of the gas station and they were kind of walking towards me. And they were like, "Hey, we'll pump it for you." And I said, "No, I got it." And they said, "Hey, we got it." And I said, "No, I'm good." And they made me nervous. So I stopped pumping gas. I put it back in. I got in my car and left. And I remember I shared that with someone, and his response was, "I mean, what were they doing? They were just walking towards you." And I remember saying, "I was a woman by myself. Four men are walking towards me. I'm not your size. And even if I was, I'm still a woman. I was scared. It's not that they had to do anything yet. It is what they were presenting to me." And I was very disappointed in that person's response. After that occurred and I'm driving off, I called a friend of mine back and we were talking and I had to hang up to pump gas and I called him back and I told him what happened. And his immediate response was, "I'm so sorry that happened. I am so sorry that happened. I will stay on the phone with you. Do you think that you want to call the gas station later or return later to make a complaint? But I'm so sorry that happened." And I was so grateful for that response because he believed me. He believed me. He said, "I'm so sorry that happened." Not, I mean, well, what did they do? If I said something made me scared, something made me nervous, it's not about your understanding. It's about listening to me, believing what I said. That's what it means. Standing in the gap is standing in the gap when there's someone who is being disrespectful or harmful or believing a woman's words. Doing something where you may not get public accolade, you may not get a parade, but standing in the gap. And to the women who stand in the gap for other women, shout out to you. I know you're tired as well. To the men who have stood in the gap for women, thank you so much. Thank you. To the men, as you reflect and you think about times where you did not stand in the gap, you have awareness now and you can do so. Standing in the gap does not mean putting yourself in harm's way necessarily, but it means doing something. It means doing something. It means doing something. It means doing something. Stand in the gap when you are led and when you know what's right in that moment. Your affirmation for today, this is for women. I'm worthy to be seen, believed, and protected. I am worthy to be seen, believed, and protected. For men, I choose to use wisdom and discernment and stand in the gap for women. I choose to use wisdom and discernment and stand in the gap for women. Thank you so much for listening to the Dr. G Speaks podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.